Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. It's Sunday, April 30th. It's about 35-mile-an-hour winds out today, so I decided to take a day off from turkey hunting. I started packing up some of my stuff for my trip to South Dakota that's coming up this week. I also wanted to take some time today and show you guys how I mount my turkey fans. This is the fan from the bird that I shot on April 15th. I just clip it off the bird when I'm processing the bird and then put it in a Ziploc bag with the spurs and the beard and throw everything in the freezer until I can get it back home and build my fan in the garage. So I just got the project center set up. I'm going to show you guys how I do my turkey fans. I don't know if it's how everybody else does theirs, but this is how the easy way that I do mine. This is how I prefer to do mine, so stay tuned. Just getting things set up a little bit here. I like to put a trash bag in a 5-gallon bucket. Just makes me a little trash can that I can put some scraps in while I'm working. It's nice, you can put it right up on the table with you. I like to take a cardboard box, like a soda box. This is just a Sprite box, and tape it down to my station. This is just painter's tape, green painter's tape. Just like to tape it down so it doesn't move around when I'm working on the fan. And I try to get everything laid out on my station. I like to try and clean up as much as I can. Some of these little pieces of feathers off the spurs. I also keep a little ice cream bucket around that has a little borax in it. It's nice. I like to put my spurs in there, let them dry out. These are actually the spurs from the turkey that I shot last spring. I just clean out the little tendons, but putting them in this bucket, I usually try and dry them for about a year if I can, but putting them in this bucket just sucks all the moisture out of them so you don't ever have an issue with bugs getting in them later. I do the same thing with the beard, just clean off everything that I can off all the flesh that I can off the end of it, and then I put it in this borax bucket, leave it out in the garage for about a year. So I'll do the same thing with this beard. I just take a knife and come down all 4 sides. That's one reason I like to put the cardboard down, is then I have something to cut into. Basically what I'm doing is just cleaning off as much of the flesh as I can. Just clean the flesh off the beard till it's as clean as I can get it. Put it down in the borax bucket, try and get borax all over it. It just helps keep bugs and stuff out of it. It dries it out, helps with the smell too. It'll never stink. If you want to do your turkey fan mount almost right away, you also have the option of just wrapping some saran wrap around it and then some tape. One thing that I'm gonna do with this beard, I have plenty of time, so I don't mind leaving them in there to dry out for a year and working on them next year. I keep the shotgun shells from when I shoot the bird, and then I use the shotgun shell to go over the top of the beard. So, and I just put a little tape around it before I put it in there, put a little more borax on it, put a little tape around it before I put it in there. So you would have the option, if you wanted to do it right away, to just put a little bit of borax in some saran wrap, wrap it around it, tape it, and then slide it up in there, and it wouldn't stink, it wouldn't smell, you know, it would stay dry, it would just dry itself out. You could put it on a mount in your house almost right away. I just have the time to leave it in the garage and let it dry kind of naturally, so that's what I choose to do. I really like to do that with the spurs. Just try to clean them out as good as I can. When I'm cleaning out my spurs, I found this works the best. I like to kind of screw a coarse thread drywall screw in there, and that helps me kind of pull out all the stuff inside the bone. And I just wipe it off on a paper towel. Just do that like 2 or 3 times. The threading on the screw actually helps get all that flesh out of the little hole in the bone. I like to work on the beard and the spurs first while the fan starts to thaw out just a little bit. It's a little easier to work on the fan once it thaws out. I know some people use a drill bit for this too. If you have a drill bit, that would work also. Just want to try and get as much of that flesh or bone marrow out of there just as you can, because then the borax can go in that hole. Just want to be able to kind of see through it. And then I actually just push the screw in, and push out this tendon on the other side. And you end up with 2 empty cavities that you can put borax in and dry them out. So once I get a little borax smashed in the end, I also take the screw and push some borax in. And that kind of helps clean it out a little more also. And then I plug one end with my fingers, scoop up some borax on the other end, and then use the screw to kind of stuff it into the hole. Then it can't come out the other end, so I just do that till it's packed in there. Just use my 2 fingers to cover up the holes on this side. And I scoop up borax on this side and just use the screw to kind of pack it down in. Or sometimes even if you just tap it, it'll fall in. Just gets it packed in there nice and tight so it can dry your spurs out. And I make sure before I move on to the fan, I make sure I wipe all that borax off my gloves. So I don't really want that borax in my feathers of my fan. I don't use borax on the fan. When I build the fan, I actually disassemble the fan and then put it all back together with Bondo. So, looks like the fan's still pretty frozen. I usually start on the back of it. Just kind of pull these feathers back so I can see where the back of the fan is. I actually prefer for it to be a little bit frozen when I'm working on it. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it, but I try and find the base of these tail feathers. Just fold these feathers over, and then I just follow those down with the knife. I'm not trying to save any of these back feathers. I just always want to take more in the field than I need. It's actually still a little too frozen, needs to thaw out just a little bit. And that's another reason I like to keep that little trash can with the trash bag in it, or bucket with the trash can in it handy, is it's just nice to get rid of all these little feathers while you're working. There we go. Okay, when I get to the front, what I try and do is count down, not really count down, but I try and keep about feathers to about right there. I like to keep some of these iridescent feathers. See how they have the little like iridescent strip on them? See how these feathers don't have the iridescent strip? I like to keep those. But really what I do is just start a couple of these I'm going to get rid of, I think. Just start cutting them off, but when I cut them off, I actually grab them and strip them. So all I have, so I just get rid of all this fluff right here. But if you strip it like that, it takes everything off of it. The flesh, just gives you just the feather. And just grab a bowl, set them in a bowl. And you don't have to worry about saving all of them if there's some really small ones. What you're trying to do is save the ones that you think are the best looking feathers. You're just going to use them to basically decorate your fan at the end. I don't worry about when I'm trying to get them off the bird. I don't worry about keeping them in a certain order or sorting them by size. I can go back and do that all while the Bondo's setting up. What I'm trying to do is get them off the bird and get them cleaned off in a bowl. As this is thawing out, doing this gives that fan a little bit of time to thaw out so I can work with the actual big fan feathers. Having this little bucket with the trash bag in it also keeps all these little feathers from flying around all over your garage. You're still going to have some of them that escape. Just kind of keeps the mess down. Because that's what you're going to end up with. It's a nice clean feather, no flesh on it, nothing that's going to smell or attract bugs later. Then when you get to these bigger feathers, it's going to be a lot less that you clean off. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually just clipping the base of them off with a knife, so I don't even really get the fleshy part, the part that the flesh is on. Just coming up just a little bit, and this knife's so sharp that it just clips them off. But what you really want to do is get rid of the fluffy feathers, because this is where you're going to glue your fan back together. If you have feathers like this, see where he's missing some feathers, you can actually just go up and strip that to where he's missing it, and then use that for one of the farthest back ones when you're building a fifth of your fan back up, and just put one of these back on top of it, and then it'll actually help your fan lay a little flatter anyway. I don't ever worry about them missing some of these feathers, or if you needed to get rid of one. This one's a good, if you needed to get rid of one of these big ones, you don't need all of them. You know, if you want to get them to, if your feathers are separated. When I shot this bird, it was raining when I was processing the bird, and the feathers are kind of separated. You can just run your finger up it and it'll put them back together. Just zips them back together. That's how they actually prune their own feathers. They just kind of run their beak up this stem of the feather. It just puts all their feathers back together. See how that one's missing some feathers right there. And I didn't start like a timer or anything, but I'm guessing I'm about 10 or 15 minutes into this whole process, maybe 20 minutes into it, counting cleaning out the spurs and everything. But see how you have all these little feathers that you can put in the bucket. And when I get to this point, I just do the same thing. I come down kind of the front, and just follow the bases of these feathers down into the fan. It's actually easier if you start on one side. But I'm trying not to cut the feathers. I'm just trying to stay out maybe even a whole layer of those little base pin feathers. Just gets rid of all the bases of all those little feathers that I clipped off. That side looks pretty close. Looks like I'm actually got a little too wide on this other side. That's always the harder side for me because I'm right-handed, so I don't mind missing. I don't mind missing this way a little bit and leaving a few of these feathers here and then coming back and sliding down these feathers after. I would rather miss a little bit to the front than come in and cut those off on accident. So, see how that's still kind of frozen, so it doesn't really, well, doesn't smell at all. Once you do this a couple times, you're actually gonna be so quick at it that you'll be done before the meat thaws out. And then with this meat, I just try and clean it off until, see how I'm getting to some of that yellow fat. That's where the bases of those feathers start. So what I'm trying to take out right now is just the pink colored meat. Wherever there's pink, I know if I can get down to that yellow, like fatty layer, but there won't be that much flesh left on the stem of the feather or the spine of the feather when I clip it. Do the same thing on the back, just a little bit. This is the first time I've ever tried to do it where I show the camera how I do it, so it's kind of weird holding the fan so the camera can see what I'm doing. It's actually easier if you're not trying to film it. I just grab all this stuff and get rid of it. Once I get to this point, it's still pretty frozen, but all the feathers are in order. So I actually just clip the feather off. Take my knife and slide it down the feather. Cleaning all the flesh off of it. Actually, maybe went a little too fast. Usually by the time I get to this point, the fan's starting to thaw out a little bit more, so it's a little easier to get the flesh off the bases. And I take a paper towel or a shop towel, just clean all the flesh off of it till the feather's clean. Then I lay them down in order. Yeah, that's why I closed the garage door. I didn't want the wind blowing in here and getting them all gross. If you time it right and this flesh thaws out a little bit more, you can actually just about pull it off with the towel. If you look at how the fan's put together, this feather, each feather as it comes up goes on top of the feather below it. So if you start from one side and you clip these feathers off till you get to the middle, it's almost like a roof. The shingles are gonna sit on top of each other as they come down. So this one's on top of this one, which is on top of this one, sits on top of this one, on top of this one, on top of this one. And then it goes the opposite way, the other way. These two middle feathers sit on top of this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So when you're clipping these, you actually build your fan both ways from both sides to the center. So I just put my knife in between the two feathers, push down just a little bit. This is one of those outdoor edge knives. It's basically a razor blade. It's super sharp. It's called the Razorlite EDC. It's my favorite knife for processing game. I like the fact that I don't really have to sharpen knives anymore. It's just got replaceable blades in it. Just push this button and the blade slides out. Push that button, slide the blade back in, let go of the button, and it stays back in. I'm not really cutting down here, I'm just shaving the meat off the feather tip, and then I'm pressing super hard when I come back. Try and make sure I get all the flesh and fat off there. Same thing with these feathers. If you need to prune them, you just pinch them, run your fingers up the middle of them, and it'll kind of fix some of the things. Sometimes if you have a piece like sticking out like that, you might have to clip it off. Okay, that was the two center feathers that I just took off right there. This is actually the left side of the fan. Now you can see it's starting to get a little more pliable, the meat's starting to thaw out a little more. So I guess I should have, I've done this quite a few times, so I'm not maybe as nervous about it as somebody that's doing it for the first time. If you are doing it for the first time and you're not sure, you're not as confident about it or sure that you can put it back together the way you want it to be, or the way it was, if you let your tail fan thaw out enough that it's pliable enough that you can open it up, you can actually go like this on your cardboard and just draw like maybe a ½ inch outside of it on the cardboard. There's going to be two feathers right there. Then you could actually flip it over and draw the other side. And that would help give you a guide of how to put it back together. That's how it would sit. And then you could just follow that when you're laying it back down on the Bondo. But it's a little hack, I guess. I don't usually do that, but I just kind of go by feel. But I've done it more than a few times, so usually I'm doing it for myself anyway, so it doesn't, I guess I'm not as picky maybe as some other people. Okay, I actually took that feather off out of order. I should have started right here. Just remember that that goes back on top of all of these. All I'm really doing up there is keeping the feathers in order that I took them off. I don't really care that they lay in a pattern. I'm just keeping them in order, so when I go to rebuild the fan, I can take the 2 feathers off of this side, the 2 feathers off of that side, the 2 feathers, the 2 feathers, the 2 feathers, and just work my way up to get the feathers to go back where they were supposed to be, where they came from. And they don't get out of order. That's another reason that I shut the garage door. It's a little more light in here when I'm working if I leave it open, but it's so windy today I didn't want the wind to come in and blow the feathers off the table when I was working. Plus it's more of a mess to clean up. As you can see, there's still some little feathers around. I'll hit those with the shop vac when I get done, or I guess I could just open the garage door and blow them out with a leaf blower too. But again, just trying not to cut the stem of the feather, just scraping all the meat off of it, keeping them in order. The other bonus of, one of the bonuses of doing your turkey fan mounts like this also is you don't have to borax the base of your tail fan. So that means you don't have to, I don't know if you've ever boraxed a turkey tail fan or not. Some people have, some people haven't, but the borax doesn't just get on the bottom on the flesh. It gets up in all these little, like, I don't know, tufts, feathers, gets halfway up the fan. If something goes wrong and something moves wrong, it gets basically all over the fan, and you gotta try and blow it out with a blow dryer, or just turns it white. It's just messy. You know, I don't like dealing with that mess. I'd rather take the time to just get rid of all the flesh. I also like the fact that when I hang these on the wall in my basement, there's no turkey meat like inside the mount that's covered in borax and wrapped in a plastic bag or taped up with duct tape. Or I tried doing a turkey fan mount with borax before, and I just didn't really like doing it that way, so I started asking around. Ended up talking to a taxidermist who told me that it's possible to, you know, as long as you're careful with it, to just take the fan apart, as long as you don't mind taking the fan apart and putting it back together. That there's a lot easier, cleaner way to do it. It might not be easier. It definitely takes a little bit longer than just trimming off as much of the meat as you can and throwing borax on it. But that's if you don't count the time that you spend trying to clean the borax out of the feathers. If you mess up and get borax in your whole entire turkey fan. Apparently I talked a little too much now because this stuff's starting to thaw out pretty good now. So might actually just slide off. Yeah, see, when it thaws out, it just slides off. That's pretty much the process for taking it apart. It doesn't take a super long time. Just gonna get this cleaned up. This is the reason I like putting down a box and just wipe the knife off. Then I'll take that in the house and wash it. I'm taping this down so I can just, so it doesn't really move while I'm working on it. But then when I'm finished, I just peel the tape up. Fold it up like that. Put it in the trash bag with the rest of the stuff. Okay, since I messed up and traced on that other piece of cardboard that I was using to clean the fan up, what I did was actually go downstairs, grab a different fan that's already done. I put down a new piece of cardboard, taped tape. So if you're doing this for the first time and you're nervous about doing it, set up a spot somewhere where you can open up your fan while it's still together. Set it down on a piece of cardboard, Sharpie around it. If you really want to be careful about it, you can actually open it up, hold it down with your hand, and then mark where the spines of the feathers go. That way when you're trying to put it back together, you can have kind of a guide of about how far apart your feathers should be. But I don't actually do that. So. The other part about this that if you can see how this Bondo is on the back of the fan, you can actually still see where the feathers come down in. So if you did make a mistake, it is possible to just cut, basically disassemble the fan just like you did the first time. That Bondo is not going to be super hard right away. It's going to get pretty hard pretty quick, but it's going to be pliable enough that you could actually break things back apart, clean your feathers back off, and start over again. But that's about what it's going to look like when you get finished. That's why you want to keep some of these iridescent feathers, some of the feathers that don't have the iridescence on it. You're just going to build your fan out. This turkey actually didn't even have the banding on the two middle feathers. This turkey does. Those are the two middle feathers that go right there. So he actually has the banding on it, which is a little unusual. Most of the turkeys that we shoot back at the family farm don't have that banding on those two feathers. This feather actually needs to move over just a little bit. So that's basically kind of what you're going to be, well, that's exactly what you're going to be ending up with if you do it this way. But it lays super flat. It's easy to put it in a mount. I'm actually going to build a new plaque mount for this one. This fan actually goes with this beard and these spurs that just came out of the borax from last year. So I'm actually going to build the entire mount for this, and I'll make a video about that too in case you want to learn how to build your own kind of DIY turkey mount. So but let's get to this other fan. We'll put it back together and I'll show you how I glue it all up and get it mounted. Okay, when I'm putting the fan back together, I try to zip all the feathers back together as I'm going, get them as kind of as neat as I can. Basically just squeeze right here with both fingers and just run my finger up the feather and it kind of zips it back together. Do that a couple times until everything lays kind of nice, and then if there's a couple bad spots I just push down, just pinch my fingers together and just slide through it. Just trying to get them to look as nice as they can, especially up here at the tops. So I'm going to start with this first feather on the outside on both sides. And I actually lay everything down dry first. Just so I can, especially since I didn't trace this actual fan, it's going to help me just get kind of a size and a lineup for it. You're just going to cover a little bit of that previous feather, maybe a third of that previous feather with the next feather. Looks like this fan's actually going to be a little smaller than that other one. Like I said, if there's any little, he must have got in a fight or something, this feather's kind of messed up, so I just come down to the base and get rid of that little piece. Just cut it off with the razor blade. You can tell the base of this feather I'm guessing got kicked with a spur. I know when I shot him, his head was out away from his body and his tail feathers were, I didn't shoot through the bird into the tail fan when I shot him, so I'm guessing that's not shotgun stuff. And then I'm just kind of bringing everything down here to the base. And I am kind of following, I guess I haven't really been looking at them, but I'm trying to. It is kind of following, this one's a little off, but it's kind of following the marks that I put on that other fan. I think this fan's actually a little bit smaller than that other fan, but it looks like it's gonna come together a little smaller. But. So let's say it's your first time doing this and you take your turkey fan apart and something happens and you don't really know which feathers go where. When you're putting this back together, you'll know something's wrong if you try and put this feather here. See how this feather has a little curve to it? The curve always to the feather always goes to the bottom side of the fan. So if you try and put this feather over here, that's the curve of the feather is going to go toward the bottom side of the fan and not with the bottom side of the fan. A mistake that a lot of people make the first time they do this is they try and make that fan flat on the bottom. See how that fan curves up on the bottom on both sides? See how all the feathers follow the curve? All the spines of the feathers kind of follow the curve, except these two middle ones are pretty straight. So if something happens, if the wind blows it apart or you get confused, or you can pick up a feather and follow the curve See how this one would be against the, if you put that right there, it's actually going to come in and cover up that feather below it. If you put it right here, it's actually just going to follow that feather below it where you can see the spines of the feathers. This one's actually going to come in and cross it. So you know that this goes on this side of the fan. And then they get bigger as they go up. So this feather is just a hair longer than the feather before it. This feather, if you put them together down at the base, is just a hair longer than that feather. So if something happens and you get it apart and you get confused, that's how you put the puzzle back together. You start with the smallest two feathers you have on the outside. And these are going to be the easiest ones to find because they almost have no feather on this side. They're really big on this right side and really small on this left side of the spine. On the other side, it's the other way. They're really small on the right side, really big on the left side. So you just start with that feather and then you put two feathers together and find the next one that's just a little bit bigger than it. And that's where they're going to go in that order. So there is a way to put the puzzle together. What I'm really trying to get across in this video is it's not that hard to, it's not as hard as it seems to take a turkey fan apart and put it back together. And then all I'm really doing right now is fixing all the feathers, kind of pruning all the feathers, and then doing like basically a size check to see if I like the size of the half circle we drew out. I'm just doing that because I used a different fan to draw the half circle. If you use your own fan, you wouldn't have to do this. You could just go through and zip all the feathers together and get them nice and neat, and then could actually start gluing everything down. I just wanted to do a little extra size check. And see how the spine of these feathers is pretty straight. Both of these middle ones. Actually the four. There's a little curve to the last two that come up. You can almost see how there's just a little bit of curve to them. These two kind of curve toward each other just a little bit. These are actually the two center feathers, but they're going to be the straightest, longest feathers in the fan. That goes right there. Then what I do when I'm trying to put these in is pick which one I think is the best. For some reason this feather right here doesn't want to zip together very good. Oh, there we go. It's getting better now. This side doesn't really want to. I think it might be wet. Feels a little wet. What I'm trying to figure out when I do these last two feathers is find out which one is the best looking feather of the two. I'm guessing when that little bit of wet spot dries out right there that's going to look better. This one's actually missing it's cut right there a little bit, so I'm going to lay that one under this one and hide it. And I kind of take all the feather tips and move them back into the center a little bit. What I'm trying to do is make like a little half circle shape right there. So yeah, this fan is just a little smaller than that other one. This is a little kind of hack you can do if you're a little nervous about putting the fan back together. You can actually put down a milk jug lid and start building your fan like that. Okay, there's two ways you can do this. You can either take a piece of cardboard that has like the really waxy thing on the outside of it. That's what I like to do. I just take that and tape it down. There's two reasons that I like to do it like this. The Bondo comes off of that really easy. That's the biggest reason. The other reason I like to do it like this is that it brings the tips of the feathers up higher than where the fan is on the table. I don't see how I have just a small piece of cardboard. So what it actually does, once I get it all glued together, I put a little bit of weight on it. It actually gives you this kind of curve to your fan, which I like because when you put it in the mount, it actually, your fan actually curves back away from the Bondoed base a little bit. So when you put it on the wall with something behind it to hang it and something in front of it to cover it, I like that it actually gets the fan to lean away from this center point. Everything kind of goes back away from that. I don't know if you can really tell, but there's kind of a void back here, but then all the, actually that's probably a better view. See how everything kind of curves back from the center point, back up. So what happens is when you put this in your mount on the wall, your fan actually lays back toward the wall instead of sticking straight out and sticking out from the wall like an inch or however much wood you had to put back here to hang your fan on the wall. So just by putting this extra piece of cardboard in here, gluing the fan down and then putting weight on it, it just gets the fan to lay back away from the center point a little bit. This is the Bondo that I used to build the fan. It's just like a body repair kit from Menards. It's not very expensive. You can actually get a few different fans done out of it if you just seal it up good when you're done. I put a little bit of this Bondo I just use a little plastic ramekin, add a little bit of the hardener to it. That's about how much I mix up. And just mix it up till it's kind of light blue. This actually might be a little too much, but Just want to make sure you get the hardener mixed into it really well. I also sprayed a little Lysol on a paper towel and wiped down the feather tips. So you don't, I probably have to do that because you're going to seal them in Bondo anyway, but I prefer to take that little extra step. Once I get that mixed up, I set it down. I'm actually going to put just a little bit in the circle just so it holds my cap in place, and I just start building out from there. I'm trying to put it down about as thick as the feather tip, you know, maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick. I'm trying to build a little half moon shape. You don't want to go too big because you have to be able to cover it up later, but you don't want to go too small either because you want it to lock your fan in place. Try and go out about maybe 3 inches from the cap. Build a nice little half moon shape. And if you have a little bit left in the container, you don't have to mix it in this either. You could just mix it on a piece of cardboard too if you want. I've done that before. I just had some of these little plastic ramekins laying around, so, and I just use a plastic like silverware knife. Make sure you wipe Bondo off of your glove if you get it on your glove when you're doing it, or you can take it off. But then that's basically when the clock starts. You want to start laying down your feathers. You want to push them down in. Use a little paint can opener just to push the feather down in. I'm not trying to get Bondo on the top of it yet. Just trying to lay the feathers down so they touch each other. I'm going to go like 4 feathers on one side and 4 feathers on the other side, just in the interest of not really speed, but time management, efficiency. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that the feathers aren't rolled one way or another either, that they're laying down flat. And as I get to these middle feathers, while that Bondo's still wet, I kind of squeeze them down into those. This feather, first feather that you put in, is already starting to get stiff. So as I'm putting in these last few feathers and it doesn't look like you're going to have room in there, I actually try and squeeze the feather tips down into those other feathers. Definitely want to work quickly because this Bondo sets up really fast. See how that feather almost doesn't even want to stick to it now. So I'm going to push these down in. Pick that one as the top one, and I'm going to rotate everything up just a little bit. I'm going to take this little paint tool, make sure everything gets pushed down into the Bondo. That kind of lays the fan down flat. See, that didn't even give me time to. Just gonna have to mix up a little bit more. You can actually mix it up on a piece of cardboard like this if you want. That's another reason I like buying the bigger can of Bondos. Like right there, I went just a little bit too slow. Part of it was trying to explain it, and instead of just doing it, I should have just done it and then explained it after. But this will work too. So get this mixed up really good. When you're mixing it, you want to be careful you don't get it on the feathers or the fan. Once it's mixed up and light blue, you're actually going to put a top coat on everything. You're going to put your hand out here. You're going to push Bondo down in between the feathers. You want to be just a little smaller circle than you were the first time. You want to save this space right here to add Bondo to glue in your smaller decorative feathers on the front of your fan later, so they attach to these bigger feathers when you do it. Also try and make sure I do the edges of these bottom two feathers just to seal that edge up. Once I get the Bondo pushed down into the feathers where I like it, I try to put down a piece of cardboard across the fan. It's not super important to do out on the feathers, but kind of up here across the top. Set down this little block of wood on it. And all that does is hold the fan down flat, and then I leave that there for about maybe 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes. All right, it's been about maybe 15 minutes. As you can see, the Bondo's starting to get set up, but it's still a little pliable. So this is what I was saying before. This is the point where if you feel like you messed something up, you still have the chance to just cut through the Bondo, disassemble your fan again, and start over. But that's one thing I like about this little paint thing. I just use it to pry up the Bondo off the plastic. See how it didn't really stick to that plastic plywood, or cardboard, I mean. But at this point you can, the Bondo's still a little warm, but you can pick your fan up, you can move it, turn it, fix any feathers that didn't quite line up. It's about what you're going to end up with. This is the point where I pull out some of these decorative feathers and start building, getting ready to build the decorative fan on top of it. I just separate them kind of by size. And I'm going to start laying them down. You can also see on these feathers kind of a discoloration where you can kind of see where it's a little darker brown right there. That's where you want to start building that decorative fan back. That's where those feathers actually covered up these feathers. These feathers got more bleached by the sun when he was strutting than those did. So that kind of shows you on your fan where to lay down these first few feathers to make it look natural. And I just, same thing, these feathers stack on top of each other just the same way we cut them out on the way out. Okay, I'm getting some Bondo mixed up, and I'm going to start putting the details on this fan. I'm probably not going to talk very much while I'm doing it. I'm going to try and get this glued up quick, but before this Bondo gets hard on me like I did last time. But just want to add some to the top of what you already had on there. That's why I like to leave that little space. Now I'm going to actually come back and fill up to the where that half moon was on the back side. So it's just going to help glue all this stuff down into the feathers of the fan and glue all the little decorative feathers together. I just leave it kind of lumped up, same thing, like 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch in the middle, and then you really gotta start setting your feathers because you don't want them to get hard. You want that to get hard before you get them all in. See how I'm just bringing the smaller ones down to the sides. Gives it a little bit of detail. Then I have the bigger iridescent feathers separated out. I put those in the middle. I actually missed one of those. This one should go on top. Just trying to get everything stabbed into the Bondo and laid down flat. The thing I like about this is there's really no right or wrong way to put them. It's kind of the beauty in the randomness, I guess. Back behind there. Nobody's gonna come over to your house and look at your turkey fan and go, "Oh, that feather's in the wrong spot." Yeah. And if you get a long one and you need a short one, you can just break it off. I just kind of sacrifice the glove to make sure that everything gets pushed down in the Bondo while it's still tacky. And I do the same thing. Make sure that feather's not cooperating much. Right there. Do kind of the same thing, put that on top, set the weight on it, but then this time I don't wait for that to dry. I actually just mix up a little more Bondo. And the reason that I do this is I want to be able to push down on those feathers with the new Bondo. Make sure everything gets glued together. Looks like that's gonna just about finish this can of Bondo. So that big can of Bondo from Menards that I buy from Menards gets about 3 turkey fans finished. Could probably get 4 if you were a little more careful with it and only mixed up exactly what you needed every time, but looks like it's gonna get the base of another one, but that's gonna be about it. It's not gonna get all the decorative feathers and stuff on it. So it'll get 3.5 fans. And I mix up about that much more Bondo. Just go back over the top of everything. And all I'm trying to do now is push it. It's kind of hard to see because I'm trying to use my hand to hold everything down, but push it down in between all the feather tips. Get it nice and smooth on the top because you're going to want to be able to put it inside some kind of a mount. What you're going to end up with is like a 3/4 of an inch thick block of Bondo that holds everything together. That feather actually flipped upside down. So I try and get the top as smooth as I can just so I can get it into a wooden mount. And I'll show you how to do that shortly. I'm actually going to build a couple mounts today too, I think. I'm going to redo a couple mounts that I did in the past that I'm not super happy with. I liked them, I just have something else I want to put on them. So I bought some hickory at my Menards. I'm going to try and do some new turkey fan mounts. That way they all match. I had kind of a mismatch of mounts down there that I had played with over the years, and just want to try and get them all to kind of match each other now. I'm going to work on that after this dries. Then what I typically do is leave the weight on this for, again, about 20 or 30 minutes. You can leave it on it overnight if you're not in a rush. Overnight's better. You know, the longer you leave it, the better it's gonna form it. But it doesn't really need the weight once that Bondo gets kind of tacky. You could leave it on there for 5 minutes if you're in a hurry, and well, realistically after just a few minutes you can pick the fan up and do things with it. But see how you're gonna end up with like a 3/4 inch thick, or maybe an inch thick Bondo base on your fan. And you just figure out something to cover up that little bit of it while you're displaying it. So, that's how I do my turkey fans. It's not super complicated. It doesn't take a long time. I think I started this one at 9:30. It's 11 o'clock right now, but I let it set up for about 20 minutes between those first two coats, and while it was doing that I packed up my backpack for prospecting in South Dakota and did a couple other little things. But I'm gonna give it about an hour to dry out or so, and then I'm gonna take a measurement on the base and start working on some of the plaques.